Artificial intelligence, or AI, is rapidly transforming the world we live in. From Siri to Alexa to self-driving cars, and recently ChatGPT, AI is changing the way we interact with technology. Hi, I'm Raju, and with me is my friend and co-host Rajiv. And in today's conversation, we're going to unpack the fascinating history of AI. We'll explore how AI evolved from a wild idea in the 90s to the powerhouse it is today. We'll look at the big moments, the challenges, and the innovations that shaped this field. So stick around, and we hope you find today's conversation insightful. Let's start from the very beginning on how and where the idea of AI was born. So, Rajiv, when and where did it all start?
Thank you, Raju, for that introduction. So many people came to know of AI with the arrival of ChatGPT in 2022, 2023. Most think that that's when it started, but that's not true. The journey started much before, in fact, much before we were born. In fact, it all started with a question back in 1950. And the question was, can machines think? Can machines think like humans? So in 1950, an American scientist named Alan Turing, he wrote a paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence and came up with something called the Turing Test. And with that test, you could basically test a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to or indistinguishable from that of a human.
Okay, so what's a Turing test? Can you talk a bit more about it?
Sure, in Turing Test, one one person, one computer, and one interrogator are kept in different rooms, all isolated from each other. Interrogator's job is to ask questions and figure out which is human and which is computer. And computer's job is to fool the interrogator and be as indistinguishable from human as possible. So it's kind of interrogator having a conversation with human and the chatbot. So this is not through voice, this is through chatbot. So I'm trying to figure out who is computer and who is human.
Very interesting. And did this paper also come up with the term artificial intelligence?
No, in fact, it did not. So, although these questions were being raised in 1950, but this term artificial intelligence was not born or did not come into surface until 1956. So, in 1956, again, American scientist named John McCarthy, he coined this term. So, McCarthy could basically be called as godfather of AI because he not only
Mhm.
named it but also organized a conference that kickstarted the whole field. And also, if I may add, the first ever AI program was called Logic Theorist. That was also built in 1956 by a group of computer scientists to replicate problem solving skills of humans. It only did mathematical theorems, but this was first ever AI program built by humans.
I also read that Eliza was the first chatbot that humans could interact using natural language. Talk us through that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in fact, the first ever chatbot was built way back in 1960s at MIT by a scientist named Joseph Weizenbaum. We could think of Eliza like a great grandmother of Siri and Alexa, but with a twist because it was only a chatbot. It could not interact with voice. And it might seem primitive now, that's what's a big deal about it. But back then, being able to type to a computer and get a human like response was simply mind blowing.
Yes, in fact, many early users were convinced of Eliza's intelligence and understanding. Some even found emotional connect and attachments to Eliza. So, if I was to summarize based on what I gathered from you, this era was really about optimism. It was characterized by hope and ambition, as researchers believed they were on the brink of creating machines that could really think and learn like humans. With that, let's move on to the 70s and 80s, right? The era when AI hit its first major speed bump. Can you talk through that? What really happened?
Yeah, that's right, Raju. So after the excitement of these and 60s, reality came knocking, and it wasn't bringing very good news. We all know that back in 70s, computers were not so powerful. Maybe they were, maybe as powerful as an average calculator today. And with those computers trying to make them think like humans, that's not an easy task. In fact, that's like trying to win a Formula One race with a bicycle. So, Few challenges happened, if I may just list it down. The first one was something called as a combinatorial explosions. What that means is, as tasks became more and more complex, the sheer number of possibilities made it, computationally impossible for early AI algorithms to handle in a reasonable time frame. Imagine it like you are trying to solve a puzzle, but every time you put a piece together, the puzzle grows bigger. The computers back then couldn't handle it. And the second issue was funding. So these AI projects were funded by government agencies and various companies. They were very patient, but ultimately they started asking questions that, where are those thinking machines you promised? Because ultimately, when they are putting in money, they want returns. And when AI couldn't deliver, the wallets were shut. By mid 70s, in fact, funding dried up very rapidly. Hence, with no money, no major breakthroughs, many grant projects were halted and many researchers left the AI field. It was also called as a first AI winter. But it's not that everything stopped. Certain researchers they did stick around, but they had to be creative. So instead of trying to build a brain, they focused on specific problems and heuristic programming rather than trying to build human-like brain.
So, in reality, it wasn't all bad news after all, and it actually helped the development of AI in the long run. It made researchers focus on what was actually possible with the technology they had. Plus, I think it gave birth to new approaches like expert systems. Basically, that's really good at one thing, like, for example, diagnosing diseases or predicting weather. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. So you're right, Rajeev.
All right, let's fast forward to the late 90s and early 2000s. This one is really interesting. After the AI winter, things started heating up again. And this time, AI was making a grand comeback with a vengeance. So, what changed?
Yeah. So in 90s and early 2000, few revolutionary things happened. In fact, one was machine learning took center stage. So now scientists, remember we talked about in 80s, scientists were building expert systems. So they were hard coding rules and asking machines to do things in a particular way. But then that changed. Scientists and researchers figured out that, what if telling computers exactly what to do? What if we teach them and teach them to learn from data? It's like instead of giving a kid a rule book, you let them learn from experience. The shift to machine learning and data-driven approaches was a game changer. But to train these algorithms with data, you needed data. So second big thing which happened was the internet explosion. The 90s saw internet boom, and suddenly we had more data than we knew what to do with. It was like striking gold or oil for AI researchers. All this data meant machine learning algorithms had plenty to chew on and learn from.
Hmm.
And the third very important thing, hardware gets a boost. Remember, we talked about how the computers back in 70s were like a regular calculator, but by 90s and 2000s, so AI when AI algorithms were getting smarter, computers were also getting faster. In fact, in 1997, Intel released the Pentium 2 processor, which was a big deal then. And by the early 2000s, we had multi-core processors and GPUs that could handle complex calculations much faster. So, it's like AI finally got the sports car it needed to win that Formula One race.
Interesting. But I also heard that IBM's Deep Blue beat world chess champion Gary Kasparov, which was really mind boggling at that time. So, what happened?
Yeah, that's right. 97, IBM built this AI program called Deep Blue, right? And it defeated world chess champion Gary Kasparov. When we think of chess, two names come to my mind: Gary Kasparov and Vishwanathan Anand. So beating Kasparov was huge. It was like announcing, AI announcing to the world that, hey, I can beat humans at their own game. Of course, chess is a very specific task with rules, but it showed the world what was possible with AI. And another important event happened during that time. In fact, around 2010, DeepMind was found, which was focused on deep learning and neural networks. And later Google went and acquired it. And this was like tech equivalent of a sports team signing a star player. It showed the world that big tech was betting big on AI.
Cool. So, what does all this mean? I mean, if I were to ask you, how would you sum up this era?
I would say AI went from being only academic exercise to something that was starting to impact our lives. This period did have cool demos, and cool tech and beating humans at their own board games. But not just that, AI, it looked like, was finally rolling up its sleeves and getting ready to tackle real world problems.
Okay, let's move on to the later part of 2000s, right?
In fact, yeah. In fact, Raju, let me flip it a little, and let's start with what happened after 2010. If you can, educate us a bit about that. In 2011, I remember hearing about IBM Watson, an AI that won the quiz show called Jeopardy. Can you talk about that? What was the deal with that?
Oh, Watson's victory in the quiz show Jeopardy was a huge milestone. You see, IBM's Watson machine basically went up against two of the world's greatest champions, Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter. And it won. You see, Jeopardy isn't just any typical quiz game, right, where you need to know the facts. It involves understanding tricky languages, those little clues in between, wordplay, and cultural references. Let's take an example. So, a typical Jeopardy question could be like, this reality TV host of The Apprentice became the 45th president of the United States in 2016. Can you guess?
Uh, who was Donald Trump?
That's right, right? So that's the format, right? Where you need to understand, as I mentioned, right, those tricky languages, cues, and in cultural references to be able to answer that. It was one of the first times actually AI demonstrated its potential in a game like this, which involved understanding nuances of human language, which was quite revolutionary for that time.
That's sounds like a tricky game. Uh, I also remember you mentioned something big happened around that time around image recognition. So what was that about, Raju?
Sure. In 2012, right, a team of computer scientists built something called AlexNet. While IBM's Watson excelled at understanding nuances of human language, AlexNet excelled at identifying images with an accuracy no one had seen before. I mean, before this, AI models really struggled with even the basic image recognition tasks. So let's say, imagine you show a kid thousands of pictures of cats and dogs, and after seeing so many of them, they can easily tell the difference between a cat and a dog, right? If you show them a picture. Well, that's how AlexNet was trained actually. It was trained on massive amounts of images, and that actually helped the model to train itself to be able to recognize images with a higher degree of precision.
Very interesting. But I believe one key reason this was possible at that time was also because of the tremendous rise in computational power, because this will require many, simultaneous concurrent calculations.
You are spot on. In simple terms, training these kind of complex models like AlexNet requires not just a lot of data, but a lot of computation power. I mean, the last decade really saw an explosion of data, right? As you mentioned previously, because of the explosion of internet. But there was also a tremendous rise in the computation power through GPUs, the same chips we use for gaming actually. And these GPUs turned out to be the perfect recipe for training neural networks. It's like, it just went from riding bicycles to driving Formula One cars, and the rise was exponential. Suddenly, because of the advancements in this computation power, AI models could process vast amounts of data in much less time.
Looks like a lot of interesting things happen. The game Jeopardy, and then uh, uh, this image recognition, etc. But let's fast forward to 2016. We talked about the game of chess earlier, but I also remember hearing about AI beating the world champion at the game of Go. And this is fascinating because unlike chess, which has a finite number of moves, the number of possible moves in Go is almost infinite. So this must have been a very big deal even at that time.
It indeed was. That was an AI model called AlphaGo from Google's DeepMind. See, you see, Go is an ancient Chinese game and is one of the most complex board games out there. I mean, way more difficult than chess, like you
Mm.
mentioned, right? Chess has only finite number of, moves, but Go has absolutely insane number of moves, it's almost infinity, right? And this is a game which requires high creativity and very, very sort of expert decision making and learning from experience. And this particular AI model that DeepMind built, it beat Lee Sedol, who was one of the greatest players Go that the world has ever seen, right? In the game of Go, and this AI model was able to beat Lee Sedol 4-1. Here's the fact: three 3 years later, DeepMind released an upgraded version of AlphaGo that beat the version that beat Lee Sedol by a score of 100-0.
So wait a minute, let me repeat that. So DeepMind
Yeah.
built AlphaGo, which beat the world champion Lee Sedol 4-1,
Yeah.
right? And this program was beaten again after 3 years by an upgraded version of the same AlphaGo by 100-0.
That's right. I know. You have to let that sink in, right? It just shows how advanced these models were becoming and how quickly, right? Lee Sedol actually retired from the game afterwards. And for the first time, people realized AI could do much more than just crunch numbers, right? In such a complex game, AI could actually apply its creativity and decision making capability and the ability to learn from experience. It was just another level.
Mm, very interesting. Okay, Rajan, now let me ask you this. We have been talking about AI beating in board games, in game of Jeopardy, in chess game of Go, etc. But when did AI really become mainstream and started entering consumer products, started entering people's lives? When did that happen?
Yeah, so we talked about these advancements in the later part of 2000, right? In AI being able to understand natural human language. Those advancements actually meant that in the later part of 2010s, AI came out of the R&D labs and started entering mainstream consumer products like Siris and Alexas of the world, right? Those virtual assistants that we depend on for our day-to-day lives. And companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, right? They were doing something which was not done previously. They were getting all this information and data about, user behavior, their browsing history, their historical data, and all these real-time cues. And they were using this data to create very, very personalized experiences for individuals. Let's say you go to an Amazon e-commerce site. If you're sort of adding an item to your shopping cart, you get a recommendation saying consumers who buy this also buy the other product along with it. Or let's say you're browsing for movies on a Friday night, looking for the right kind of movie that you want to watch, and then it throws you a list of recommendations based on what you watched previously. How does all of that happen? So this is what these companies were doing. They were actually gathering all this information to curate experiences or offers that were very relevant to what you like and what you prefer.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So this form of AI, we might call it predictive AI, which we have been noticing around us for a few years now. But then now let me jump to ChatGPT because that is probably the reason we are having this
Yeah.
conversation. But I'm sure ChatGPT didn't just pop up one day in 2022. There must have been some history to it, although we're talking about all the history, but there's specific to ChatGPT, when did that started, coming on surface? So if you can just talk about a bit of history around ChatGPT.
Sure. So in 2017, Google's DeepMind released this paper called Attention is All You Need. This paper introduced something called the transformer model, right, which completely changed how AI processes language and information. And this massive breakthrough laid the foundation for all the powerful language models that came afterwards, like ChatGPT, for example, right? The release of ChatGPT in 2022 November was a huge moment. It felt like AI just went mainstream overnight. I mean, my jaw just dropped when I just saw what it could do. It was absolutely mind blowing. Chat GPT took the world by storm because suddenly just anyone could have a real conversation with an AI that responded in the most natural human like way. I mean, people were using it to brainstorm ideas, draft emails, write stories, you name it. And it wasn't just tech people. It was not a techie's tool, right? ChatGPT's interface was so simple that anyone could hop on. Just ask anything and get a surprisingly good response. I mean, in a couple of months, it crossed over 100 million users globally. And at that point in time, it became the fastest growing application in history.
Absolutely. I think while AI has been happening for decades, as we spoke earlier, but this moment, Chat GPT moment, was nothing short of revolutionary. And it wasn't just a step forward. It was a giant leap, that brought AI into the spotlight and changed the game entirely. In fact, it's improving itself and getting better day by day.
Yes, and 2 years after it released now, right, there are many other AI models and much more advanced versions that have come out. And it can generate all kinds of content. I mean, you name it, videos, images, audios, and all of that using just simple, plain natural language inputs, right? These AI models are just getting better and better in every iteration. I mean, this whole landscape is evolving and moving so fast. It's almost next to impossible to actually catch up.
Absolutely. I think we all are in awe of ChatGPT and the models alike. But I'm also curious to know, where are we heading from here? What's coming next?
That's really, really, really an interesting question. I mean, we're already seeing AI become a very big part of everyday life, from, I mean, content generation to self-driving cars to smart assistants. But the future could be even more mind-blowing, trust me. I mean, imagine AI helping scientists make groundbreaking discoveries or helping humanity solve big global challenges like climate change. AI is going to keep evolving, and we are just at the beginning of this incredible journey. But I think the equally important and a big question is, how do we regulate this phenomenal technology so that it's used responsibly and it benefits humanity and leads to our progress and prosperity?
Absolutely. You're right. In fact, I remember watching a recent event by Tesla wherein Elon talks about robotaxis and humanoid robots, etc. So it was really fascinating seeing a car which does not have a steering wheel, which does not have pedals, it's driving on its own. And then you're seeing humanoid robots who are able to, have a human-like conversation with you, who is able to dance and who is able to, act as a bartender and serve you your favorite drink. And it was pretty fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
But even in that, Elon did say that yes, we have to be careful about this very, very intelligent being which is being developed. I have been hearing Elon always say and give focus on this responsible AI and controlling this technology, regulating it. So yes, although we are in awe of it, like you rightly mentioned, that it needs to be regulated and used responsibly. Very, very important. So great, Raju. That was like really exciting, and I think although it does need to be regulated, but I think we both agree, and I think we all will agree that we
Yeah.
are witnessing this incredible era of AI with endless possibilities. And I'm sure there's many more exciting stuff to come in future. But for now, this was a conversation about the history of AI so far. So that's a wrap for today's episode. And we hope this deep dive into evolution of AI has been, as fascinating for you as it was for us.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more. Please also check out the links in the description of this video for in-depth reading. We'll be back with even more exciting topics in the world of AI. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.